The Sector 47 9S Archives. Part 1. The Assignment. Archive 1. The Roswell Incident. Former Classification. Restricted, Pre-FTL Cultural Containment Division. People often imagine that retirement is peaceful. They imagine distant oceans, quiet worlds, and the luxury of forgetting old assignments. In my case, retirement consists mostly of sorting through 78 years of reports that officially never existed, filed by an agency that officially never existed, concerning civilizations that officially had never been contacted. I suppose there is a certain symmetry in that. My name is of little importance now. The few colleagues who still remember me know me by different names, most of which were fabricated for administrative reasons. During my service, I held the rank of Senior Field Observer within the Cultural Containment Division, a branch operating far beyond the jurisdiction of the Galactic Union and, according to every public record, far beyond common sense. Our mission was simple in theory and impossible in practice: to monitor industrial civilizations that had not yet achieved faster-than-light travel, and to ensure that their development proceeded undisturbed. Officially, the Galactic Union prohibited all interference. Unofficially, countless exceptions had accumulated over the centuries. Entire departments had been created to interpret those exceptions, regulate them, conceal them, and occasionally deny their existence altogether. The Cultural Containment Division belonged to the last category. We did not conquer worlds. We did not uplift primitive species. We did not manipulate governments or alter the course of history. At least, that is what our recruitment brochures claimed. In reality, our responsibilities were considerably less glamorous. Most assignments involved correcting navigational errors, retrieving misplaced equipment, suppressing inconvenient rumors, and persuading absent-minded scientists that inhabited planets were unsuitable locations for experimental landings. As a newly graduated observer, I was assigned to Sector 47 9S, a minor stellar system located in one of the quieter regions of the Orion Arm. Locally, its dominant species referred to their star simply as the Sun. Among veteran agents, the assignment was regarded as a punishment. The inhabitants had not yet left their own satellite. Their nations remained divided by ideological disputes, territorial conflicts, and an almost admirable talent for turning scientific progress into military competition. No one expected them to become relevant for several centuries. My supervisor summarized the situation during my final briefing. "Congratulations," he told me. "You have been assigned to the most uneventful sector in the division. If you're fortunate, you'll spend the next decade filing atmospheric reports and mediating livestock-related misunderstandings." He paused for a moment and glanced at my transfer documents. "Try not to create any incidents." It was sound advice. Unfortunately, by the end of my first week in Sector 47 9S, we received Roswell. Part 2. The Visitor. In the decades that followed, human speculation surrounding Roswell grew increasingly elaborate. Military recovery operations, secret treaties, interstellar reconnaissance missions, biological experiments. Entire libraries would eventually be dedicated to reconstructing an event whose true cause was, in retrospect, profoundly disappointing. The individual responsible for the incident was Professor Selkar Ithrin, Senior Fellow of the Villari Institute of Stellar Dynamics, and, at the time, 72 years into a retirement that had proved largely theoretical. Contrary to popular imagination, Professor Ithrin was neither a military officer nor an explorer. He was an astrophysicist of considerable reputation who had spent most of his career studying radiation pressure, orbital mechanics, and the long-term stability of solar sails. His publications were respected across several systems, although his colleagues frequently remarked that his enthusiasm for independent expeditions greatly exceeded his respect for administrative procedure. The Vilari themselves had never embraced faster-than-light travel. Their civilization had flourished around a sparse and ancient star, whose planetary system contained relatively few heavy elements, encouraging the development of remarkably lightweight technologies. Their ships relied on immense reflective structures, solar sails only a few atoms thick, woven from crystalline materials capable of surviving centuries in interstellar space. Elegant, efficient, and, as subsequent events would demonstrate, catastrophically vulnerable to budget-conscious academics. The solar system lay well beyond the usual Velari routes. Professor Ithran had no official reason to be there. He was merely conducting a personal survey of several nearby stars, and had elected to cross the region using an outdated transit corridor maintained by the Galactic Cartographic Authority. The corridor had been closed for maintenance 23 cycles earlier. More specifically, a section near the outer boundary of the system had been declared temporarily restricted while navigational beacons were being recalibrated. Travelers were advised to use an alternate route. The detour added less than 2 days to the journey and required payment of a modest administrative fee. Professor Ithran, after reviewing the available options, chose to ignore the restriction. The official inquiry later discovered that he had annotated the warning notice with the handwritten observation. Excessive bureaucracy remains the greatest obstacle to scientific progress. Unfortunately, the obstacle proved somewhat more substantial than anticipated. Without the guidance network, the sail entered an unstable gravitational stream, generated by the alignment of several outer planets. Automated correction systems attempted to compensate, overloading sections of the reflective surface and scattering fragments of navigational material across a sparsely populated region of the third planet. That region was known locally as New Mexico. At the Academy, we had spent months studying first contact scenarios, cultural contamination models, and the ethical responsibilities of observing pre-industrial civilizations. None of the instructors had devoted much attention to the possibility that our first major assignment would involve an elderly physicist attempting to save money on transit fees. By the time our office in Sector 47, 9S received the alert, local military authorities had already begun collecting debris from the desert. As the junior observer on duty, I naturally assumed that the division would deploy specialists, diplomats, or at least someone with practical experience. Instead, my supervisor handed me a stack of containment protocols and instructed me to attend an emergency meeting. "Welcome to field operations," he said. Only years later did I learn the first rule of our profession. The universe is governed not by grand conspiracies, but by minor administrative decisions whose consequences nobody anticipated. Part 3. Damage Control. I arrived at the emergency meeting, expecting something worthy of the Academy's recruitment holofilms. For 3 years, our instructors had shown us dramatic simulations involving hostile encounters, diplomatic crises, and the delicate management of first contact. We had studied advanced concealment techniques and memorized hundreds of pages of cultural contamination protocols. The reality proved rather less inspiring. The conference room contained 14 officials from 6 departments, none of whom appeared to agree on whose responsibility the situation actually was. A representative from navigation blamed the Galactic Cartographic Authority for delaying maintenance on the transit corridor. The Cartographic Authority blamed the Vilari Institute for allowing retired academics to operate private vessels. Someone from legal questioned whether Professor Ithran's insurance policy covered incidents involving pre-FTL civilizations. 2 analysts spent nearly an hour debating the precise definition of the word crash. Meanwhile, fragments of alien technology were being collected by the military forces of the United States. As the most junior observer present, I eventually gathered enough courage to ask the obvious question: what exactly are we going to do? The room fell silent, Director Sorath, who had supervised Sector 47-9S for nearly a century, looked up from an alarming quantity of paperwork. "Young man," he said, "concealing evidence is easy. Convincing an intelligent species that it has found nothing, that requires finesse." At the time, I assumed he was about to describe some sophisticated containment strategy, involving memory suppression or advanced infiltration techniques. Instead, he activated the operation plan. The military would recover some debris, but not all of it. Certain documents would be classified indefinitely. Others would be quietly released years later. Different agencies would issue contradictory explanations. Journalists would receive anonymous tips leading nowhere. Enthusiasts would collect testimonies. Experts would disagree with one another in public. Theories would multiply until no single narrative could dominate the others. I stared at the projections in disbelief. "That will work." Director Sorath adjusted his spectacles and smiled. "You are new to this sector. Humans possess a remarkable talent. Present them with two conflicting explanations, and they will spend generations arguing over which one is correct." He paused. "Present them with 10, and they will do most of our work for us." And so they did. In the decades that followed, the inhabitants of Earth produced books, documentaries, investigations, and conspiracies of extraordinary complexity. Entire careers were built upon the Roswell incident. Governments denied what citizens believed. Citizens doubted what governments admitted. Experts argued with witnesses. Witnesses argued with journalists, and journalists argued with one another. Some theories came surprisingly close to the truth. Others involved secret treaties, hidden laboratories, interstellar invasions, and biological experiments. None correctly identified the central cause of the event: an elderly astrophysicist who had refused to pay a modest administrative fee. As for Professor Selkar Ithrin, he survived the incident with little more than injured pride, and a profound irritation toward the Galactic Cartographic Authority. The disciplinary committee later issued its final ruling. Official sanctions: a fine of 14 interstellar credits, temporary suspension of his navigation license, mandatory attendance at the seminar, The Importance of Authorized Transit Corridors. Professor Ithrin appealed the decision for 23 years. He lost. To the end of his life, he maintained that the true problem had not been his unauthorized route through Sector 47-9S, but the excessive bureaucracy of galactic institutions. Curiously enough, many humans appear to share his opinion. For my part, Roswell was my first lesson as a field observer. At the academy, they taught us to fear hostile civilizations, catastrophic technologies, and diplomatic disasters. No one warned us about retired scientists. No one warned us about paperwork. And certainly, no one warned us that the quiet little system assigned to inexperienced recruits would become the most fascinating post in my entire career. That, however, is a story for another archive. End of Archive 1. Sector 47-9S remains under observation.